Hi, and welcome to the Passionistas Project podcast, where we talk with women who are following their passions to inspire you to do the same. We're Amy and Nancy Harrington, and today we're talking with Nicole DePaula, who has been globally connecting policymakers and researchers for more than a decade to create a public understanding on key issues related to sustainability and public health. As a planetary health advocate, she champions the socioeconomic advancement of women through environmental conversation. She's the founder of the Women's Leaders for Planetary Health, and in 2019, she became the first awardee of the prestigious Klaus Tofur Sustainability Fellow at the Institute for Advanced Sustainability Studies in Potsdam, Germany. Nicole is the author of the book Breaking the Silos for Planetary Health, a roadmap for a resilient post-pandemic world. So please welcome to the show, Nicole DePaula.
Hi, Nancy and Amy. Thank you for having me today.
What's the one thing you're most passionate about?
I think recently it's definitely planetary health. We've been advocating so much, and at the beginning the term was, "What is planetary health?" Sounded like a horoscope thing, right? So it was a term that it was a bit weird. In some language doesn't translate well. I think in German, for example, it's hard to translate. In Portuguese as well. I'm from Brazil, so it was also a bit funny, but definitely is the topic that we should be talking about, specifically now when we need to recover, hopefully, from this pandemic.
So tell us what planetary health means and how it relates to what you do for a living.
Yeah, so maybe what I do, my background, I tend to say I'm a fake doctor, right? So I have a PhD in international relations, so I'm not a medical doctor, because I've been talking a lot with public health experts. It's quite an interesting exercise. And so planetary health, from my perspective, is a very interesting narrative of things that decision makers should be talking about or acting. So it's basically everything. So the planet is changing, right? We say that if the planet is sick with all the climate change impacts, biodiversity loss, pollution, we don't know anymore what we have in our foods. There's so much chemicals there, processed food, and crisis. We used to have a big problem, of course, with hunger, and now it's, half of the population is obese. So of course we're changing our lifestyles. And the way the planet is changing, the way that we are impacting our planet, so that's why we say this anthropogenic impacts, it's impacting public health. So the decision normally is, what is health at the end of the day, right? Is everything that is inside our bodies and it's just this small system? Or we should talk about health as connected to the health of our planet. So the planetary health as a scientific discipline, or not discipline, there's discussion that I think it started as saying it's a discipline, but I'd say it's an approach, a new area of studies, call it that way. I think many researchers were already discussing sustainability connecting to human health. So in the end, it's very simple. It's just trying to connect sustainability to public health policies. And on the issue, of course, scientists are trying to understand how exactly climate change impacts human health. We have heat waves that impact the most vulnerable in cities. So we're trying to measure. That's not exactly what I do. People would do modeling, but in the end, we need to communicate and inform decision makers of this field and say, what do we do about it? And that's what I'm passionate about. How do we get the science and bring it to the people who can take these decisions? And it's, of course, not an easy thing, especially these days, but we keep trying.
So you mentioned COVID. Talk about how the relationship to COVID and planetary health, how is it affecting the world and the planet?
Yes, COVID is, as sometimes mentioned, and I notice in the book, of course, it's a very bad thing. But if every crisis brings an opportunity, that's the sad reality. If we need change, we probably learn through love or pain, right? So it's very hard to change behavior if you don't have a big crisis. And COVID is now showing, I think, stimulating this conversation about, okay, what is exactly connections? It's just a sanitary thing. It's the disease, but what you're learning now and trying to communicate, actually, I think a lot of people have been trying to communicate this before, but the way, for example, deforestation, the way we are transforming our environment, we are increasing the chances of this contact with new viruses. So, for example, illegal wildlife trade, if you're bringing species to different, and because the world is so connected, in 3 days, if you have a new disease, in 3 days, the whole world is contaminated. So the COVID is really showing that we need to connect more the dots between these issues of biodiversity conservation. There is a link with zoonotic diseases when you have pathogens, right, in animals jump to humans. We don't have definitive answers about how exactly COVID was created, but 6 out of 10 new diseases come from animals, so this zoonotic disease. So we know that we are creating some sort of this possibility of increasing diseases, and climate change, for example, affects our natural ecosystems. So new mosquitoes, they wouldn't be in Europe, for example, because of the climate. Now we find, so we have a new ecology of these diseases that it's important to understand and study. Again, we have researchers doing that. So planetary health brings this conversation and links these points.
So let's take a step back. You talked about the fact that you're from Brazil. Tell us a bit about growing up there, and when did you first become aware of these issues, and what inspired you to pursue this field?
In Brazil, of course, I think I always wanted to. I remember as a, let's say, teenager, the time you need to decide about university, I was between two things. I think I love studying. So I think I love learning. So it doesn't matter what it is. People say, oh, what's your favorite, subject? I liked everything. At the end, I started being better at humanities and others, but I was still at some point very good in chemistry, very good in math, some parts of physics. So I wish I had more talent. I wish I had kept my talent from that time. Would be great for calculating and modeling these days, which I don't feel that I'm very capable. But I enjoyed learning and I enjoyed traveling. So that was a big thing. So I think, if you're uncomfortable in new places. So for example, from Brazil, I remember going to Portugal at an early age, and I didn't enjoy so much because it was so similar to Brazil. And I think nowadays I would think differently, because it's a fantastic city. In Lisbon, for example, it changed so much. But the traveling part was inspiring. And so I was trying to find things, what can I do that unite all these many disciplines that I enjoy and traveling. So initially, I also was very good at debating, especially with my family. If I wanted something, I would debate until they were tired. And so it was, some people found that, of course, very annoying, but they thought I would be a good lawyer, right? So I thought about it, and in the end, I found this brochure that's saying, oh, international relations. It was a new course at that point. Remember also globalization and all this. So that's something we have of course, the University of São Paulo is, let's say, top university in Brazil, depending on the subject, but it is very important center. But they didn't have international relations when I was applying for it. So there was another university that had leading that in São Paulo. I'm from São Paulo. And so I joined that and started doing international relations. But at that point, nobody knew, what do you do with international relations, right? It's just, and in the first year, it was actually the time when the United States was not ready to sign, or was withdrawing from the Kyoto Protocol, which is the initial agreement in the whole climate sphere. So as a student in political science, I was like, why, if it's such a good thing for the planet, why we have the biggest power saying that they don't want to agree with this? It's good for the planet. So that's how I entered the climate diplomacy conversation. So again, I entered the sustainability sphere through the political perspective, right? And then from that on, I started doing a lot of understanding how countries negotiate about these treaties. So it was climate, then biodiversity, and quickly I could actually move to France. So my university had an agreement. So I moved to France, and then I started studying a lot from the perspective of the European Union, which is another whole in regional negotiations of agreement to have a global position. So all that, it's endless, and it was fascinating. But I tended to focus on the sustainable development aspects. And in Rio, Brazil, also it's a very important country for sustainable development. The Amazon has always been on the agenda. We have infinite natural resources. It's the mega diverse country's top. So Brazil has been very important for these negotiations. And so that's how I started my academic life. And there was no specific moment, right? I had an aha moment for other things later, but for that, I just really enjoyed. We say the planetary health is really about multidisciplinary. Whatever we do, we need to unite disciplines. And international relations was always let's say, a collection of disciplines. You did economics, law, sociology, theology, linguistics, things, and you had to make sense of all this. So I think from the early age, I was maybe comfortable navigating multidisciplinary systems, and which today is very useful because you're kind of comfortable. You're not there to protect a discipline, and you're just free to kind of have this dialogue, which is so important.
So tell us about some of the fellowships that you've done through the years. The International Institute for Sustainable Development, what was your work like there?
Yeah, so the International Institute for Sustainable Development is actually it's a think tank, and that's through this organization that I could actually be in the practice of sustainability, tracking sustainable development in real time, because you are going to all this at the UN and trying to understand the country's positions and why. So it's a lot of work of intel. In the end, the product, you would say you do reports and informing in a very succinct way what countries are doing. However, you need the whole background. So most of the people there were doing their PhDs or at least a master's in one of the specific multilateral negotiations. So it was more, so we were part of a global team tracking this, but usually it's also connected to your academic research. So this was during my PhD times where I could, I think, we visited, almost 60 countries. And it gave a lot of perspective, from what people think, because one solution, in Europe is not a solution, in Africa is not a solution, in Latin America. And that's why it's so slow, and that's why it's so difficult, because of course we do need global solutions. However, you still need to kind of get the contextualized moments of this. So very challenging, but that's what I did there. It was really getting and tracking sustainability in practice at the UN level.
And as we mentioned in our intro, in 2019, you became the first awardee of the Klaus Tofur Sustainability Fellow. So tell us about that period and what that experience was like.
Yeah, so that's a very recent experience, and it's one of my favorites because it gave me a lot of freedom to, I think, do follow my passion and do the things that I usually say it's when is the time that you have time and money together? It never. So either you have time or no money, or money and no time. So this fellowship is really dedicated to kind of people do their projects and elevate them. And so I was so proud to, Klaus Tofur is the former Minister of Environment in Germany. He was also the head of the United Nations Environment Program before. So he was someone who was, doing politics in Germany, but also moved to Kenya and was the head of a large UN organization. And he had to also understand, right, this compromises, how it works. Africa is not the same as Germany. So, and of course, is very influential public figure. So he and together a few of, I think, Nobel Prizes founded this institute in Potsdam. And it's a very interesting, I think I had a lot of intellectual freedom there, and I could develop the book, Breaking the Silos for Planetary Health, which if you don't have time to sit down and write, it's, you never finish. So I could do that. I could support Brazil in a large planetary health global event together with the Harvard University. And this was a fantastic, really expanding the field of planetary health in Latin America, because one of the things I try to say is there's no point of having planetary health conversation if it's only in Australia, Europe, and North America. So we need to bring that to the global South. And I could found a social enterprise called Women Leaders of Planetary Health. And this has opened so many doors to a lot of my work today. So I really enjoyed that, and very supportive colleagues, directors, and it was really, really a very fun time in my career. I'm very thankful for that. I think it was, when you get these things at the right time, you really could, I think I used the opportunity. And then COVID came, and that for me professionally was good, because I was talking so much about health sustainability, and unfortunately, you need a crisis to push these things. And it's a sad reality, but from that perspective, it was a good timing to talk about this.
Talk us through what you do. You connect policymakers and researchers. So what is that process? What's your day like?
Well, that's funny. My day has been I don't have a routine. I think it's first 2 weeks that I'm having more of a routine in my life, and I'm almost 40. So I enjoy that. I think I worked a lot to get a lot of flexibility in my work life. So I have absolutely no routine because every day, and now with the pandemic, it became then a different world, right? We could do so much virtually and things, but it was more about, so I did a lot of work in different countries when I was, at ISD, the International, when I said I was tracking sustainable development negotiations, every time was in a different country. So I would be in the desert, and the next week I would be in the Arctic, literally. So you have to pack, for north of Finland and Dubai. So it has been very hectic, but I enjoyed that. But definitely not a common existence, especially for women, as we know. People expect that you have your traditional things, and then you have your family life, like a traditional way, and all that. And I always refused in a way, and said, no, that's really exciting to not have this routine. That's not what I want. And during this time, so if you travel so much, you're also connecting with people around the planet. So it facilitates so much your work doing, if you have to gather intelligence, you have to see what that country is thinking and what the others. So how can I, if I'm writing a paper or even my PhD, I had to really for 5 years, doing research, and I was about the strategic partnership between Brazil and the EU on specific agreements. So things are evolving, right? So I need to track that. And so this connection is first through research, because you have to inform and you have to publish and you have to get the knowledge. But then once you're working with these organizations, you're actually also transferring that knowledge, or trying to, it's not so much of an academic exercise, but if you're working with think tanks, then you do roundtables and you do other events, and it's more of the networking part, exchanging. The word that I like here, cross-pollinating knowledge around disciplines, around institutions. So that's a lot of what I do. And so it's not a clear-cut thing, but when you have to, do your research, like a political scientist, and a lot of interviews, for example, the method, if you're this participant observant, you are in the process. So not only reading, because what is published in the end, it's not necessarily what was happening. There's so much in politics that cannot be published. That's why these personal connections are so important, because you need trust from these individuals to get the information. That's how I think it's a very important talent. So this personal diplomacy with trust building, networking in many countries, that really helps to kind of, today I have my colleagues said, we'll connect. And I moved to Bangkok after, right? So I lived in France. Then I moved to Thailand, and I lived in Canada, and I lived in Washington, D.C., then I lived in Brazil, of course, and now I'm in Italy. So it's kind of, at some point, gets tiring with the bureaucracy, of the visa things. That's but apart from that, it's fascinating because you adapt. And I think that's what the world needs today, right? We all had to adapt so fast. But honestly, for me, it was just, when the lockdown came, I just felt that was just my regular life, that everybody could finally understand that we could do so much online, that we could do so much virtually. So a lot of this tracking of the negotiations we did virtually. And I worked like this with Slack or all these chat functions with people around the world that I never met since 2012. So, 10 years later, the world figured out that it is possible. We don't need to fly across the world to have, a one-on-one meeting. That's absolutely insane.
We're Amy and Nancy Harrington, and you're listening to the Passionistas Project podcast in our interview with Dr. Nicole DePaula. To learn more about Women Leaders for Planetary Health's mission to empower women to lead planetary health solutions at the front lines of development in the Global South, visit WLPH.org. We'd like to take a moment to invite you to the 3rd annual Power of Passionistas Summit this September 21st through September 23rd, 2022. The 3-day virtual event is focused on authentic conversations about diversity, equity, and inclusion. This unique gathering of intersectional storytellers and panelists harnesses the power of our rich community of passionate thought leaders and activists to pose solutions to the problems plaguing women and non-binary people today. Early bird tickets are on sale now through August 21st for just $99 at thepassionistasproject.com. So be sure to register before the special discount rate ends. We'd like to thank our sponsors, Melanie Childers Master Coach, Graceful Revolution, the ASA Collective, Tea Drops, Aaron's Coffee Corner, Flourishing Over 50, Espanola Real Estate Team, Mermaid's Garden, Sarah Finn's Coaching, Tara McMahon Wellness, Rebecca Chavez Hauk, and Triscom Public Relations. Now here's more of our interview with Nicole. Did you miss traveling, though? So for someone who likes to be on the go?
Exactly. That's a very, interesting question. And the good thing is I did so much that I feel a bit satisfied with, the places that I've been, and it's never enough. If you like traveling, you can always do again and learn more and spend more time. But I definitely felt at the beginning it was fine because, with the lockdown, you could produce everything and write. I used my time a lot to do the writing. And what I miss is just the easy, the facility that you could go. So now if you're in Italy, you have to go back to Germany. It feels like you're going to another continent in the civil war, So and that's, I think it's sad because, if you have family also abroad, and it's kind of a worry that if you need to travel fast and not everybody will have, the same advantages or being treated equally. So in the end, the most vulnerable will always suffer more. They will not have support. They cannot. So I miss the easy connections to exotic places. That's what I miss.
So in 2019, you co-founded the Planetary Health Research Group. So tell us about that and what the mission is of that organization.
So this group is hosted by the University of São Paulo in Brazil. And it's hosted by there is an Institute for Advanced Studies there, and was together with Professor Antonio Saraiva, who is an absolutely partner in crime in Brazil, and an amazing group of interdisciplinary researchers. So we actually, with Professor Saraiva, we met in the first meeting of the Planetary Health Alliance in Boston. It was hosted by Harvard. And we met in a museum with, I think it was natural history, and you have like penguins around us. So it was a very fun dinner and in the middle of the museum. And we just connected. And for many years, we were, discussing and going to these meetings it's an annual meeting, until Brazil got the right to host. For the first time, the Planetary Health Alliance would, give the right for a developing country to host this conference. And then we were just natural partners, and we were working direct together. So we decided to have this an official center at the University of São Paulo, in the most interdisciplinary center there. And this is growing now. I'm affiliated, I'm a co-founder, and Professor Saraiva is really leading that now. He's a very senior professor there. So it's just fascinating because it's not something that belongs to the University of São Paulo, but it's something that belongs to Brazil, because we have many partners. We have people from all regions. As you know, Brazil is a very, very big country. So it's kind of really well distributed now. And it's fascinating to, even for me, when you go to meetings, you have all the different accents from Brazil, that sometimes if you also stay in your bubble, you don't even listen to different voices. And if you're advocating for this diversity in decision making, it starts there. We have to have people from different regions. So it's growing, and we could host successfully the conference in last year. Yeah, because January, so definitely last year, I think April. We got 5,000 people who registered for this, and from 130 countries, and because also it was the first time it would be in Brazil, but with the pandemic it had to be online. But we really took the opportunity to make this then an inclusive. Not a lot of people these conferences would be usually around 400 people, and we could at least bring that to the houses of in people in 130 countries. So, and that's why what I like to talk about also the planetary health movement. It's a scientific thing, but also if you don't talk and people don't get excited and don't want to do things, it's useless, right? So it's the planetary health movement as social movement is very important as well. And I think we worked quite well. And there are now new programs of young ambassadors from different universities, and they're doing things. So it's about also inspiring others to get to know more about the field, to apply to their, how would they think, in their topic of research, discuss this. So yeah, so very proud of that one. That's how I could help my own country to explore the theme.
And in 2020, you founded the Women Leaders for Planetary Health. So what is the mission of that organization?
Yeah, it was so in the United Nations Climate Conference, the COP25, December, I had it with the support of IS, this organization that was in Potsdam. I really wanted to do something that would, I was doing so much on planetary health, but the gender dimension was really mentioned. I wasn't hearing about it. It was just, a known issue. I definitely, the mission is we want to empower women to lead planetary health solutions in the global south. Simple as that. Because how many women, and sustainability is very full of women, but how many women really leading solutions, or, receive funding to do their own thing? Or that's the challenge that we have, right? And so I wanted to focus on that discussion first, to understand why, if we empower women, what's the difference for planetary health? And I mean, we're doing research on that, right? But of course, there's many indications that you can accelerate the impact of sustainable development policies if you have women empowered and able to take the lead and make a change. If you want to, like in food systems, for example, if you can be investing in agriculture, in bio things. However, if women don't have land rights, if legally they are discriminated and they cannot produce their own things or do agroecology practices, it's kind of useless. So we need to pay attention to this, to many of inequalities, not only income, but also opportunities. And that's why I wanted to, again, bring the planetary health conversation to low and middle income countries. So I was really targeting that as part of the mission. That's why the first round, we created a digital academy, which was, with the pandemic, was great because everything could be digital, and we had more than 30 countries participating in our things. So, and very, let's say, non-reachable, difficult countries. We had people also in Palestine, we had people from Sudan, we had people in Zimbabwe, many from Brazil, in Latin America. All these women, they all share the same problems, but also the same passion and the same solutions. You see, they're doers, and the narrative is really not to make, women I didn't create an organization to say, we're suffering, it's so difficult, they're discriminated. The point is how we empower them to do what they want to do, but have the right resources and the leadership skills. So we focus really on leadership training sessions, and we had our wonderful Angela Philp, who also supported us on that. And I was mostly focusing on this research part of planetary health. And so we write papers and do the research as well, how climate or biodiversity, how these things connect to gender. Yeah, so that's how, and it's growing at the UN. So it was good to also have that conversation at the UN. That's how it started. And now we are a social enterprise, legal institution in Germany. And I'm very excited to see how this is growing. We have a team in Brazil now. We have things growing in Africa. We have things in Southeast Asia. Yeah, I'm very excited. That's, I think, that's the passion. I think our jobs, and if you work with policymakers, it's not always fun, right? There are, of course, politics enter in the middle. Things can be delayed and take time to drive change. But this is really the fun part, I think, of my work, because you see the results, and you see also the results at the personal level. You have sometimes, I think we underestimate how much we could help people by simple things, just, supporting them with the letter. So the mentoring part of we had this digital academy, but also we were pairing individuals with senior mentors. So we had a mentorship program targeting low and middle income countries, women in low and middle income countries. So, and I heard so many stories after, because at the beginning I thought, well, this is not, it's not a big deal. It's just, okay, we're helping a little bit. But when you see later what they tell and the decisions that they took in the end, or the courage that they had to do their own things, so you get surprised and you see, wow, this is we did this. And that's very rewarding.
Can you tell us about maybe a success story, something that you've seen come through the organization?
Yeah, I think, what I saw a lot was this positive. They tell stories that, oh, when I joined the program, I was a bit lost, I didn't know what to do, or maybe careers. And they felt empowered to take the decisions that they already knew that they would do, but they felt validated somehow I can do this. So I heard many stories like this. If they want to maybe start a new master's program, or if they want to change careers, if they want to quit their toxic jobs, there were stories like this, or people who they want to change industries and do more work on sustainability. I saw a lot of this. And maybe at the end I can tell another story, but I'll keep it a secret.
So what can women who aren't kind of full-time activists in this field, what can we do on a day-to-day basis to have an impact on the planet?
Yeah. So this is it's a common question that we get, right? So how, of course, everybody wants to know how they can make a better place for all, but I like to call attention to another point, because yes, you can do your recycles, you can eat, reduce consumption of meat. Normally what I say in terms of impact, if you change your diets, that's the easiest and the biggest impact you're going to have. So not so simple to do it. And especially it depends where you live and your culture or your habit. But that's what researchers show, that's the biggest impact you can have. If you change your diet and have, of course, less meat, more plants. And so there is something called planetary health diet that doesn't say you can never eat meat, but you definitely have to shift the quantity and the proportion of things that we're eating. As we know, we're not so healthy these days. So I would invite our participants to Google planetary health diet. That's an interesting exercise. But what I like to think about, and that's why it's important also to think in this, which is also hard, but the systemic part, right? Nobody will completely change. What I'm trying to do is really, how do you address the root causes of these problems that we're saving? I don't think it's our 5-minute, 3-minute, or 60 seconds shower that will do that. So when we try to put the solutions on the shoulders of individuals only, you're not addressing the problem. You're just masking the problem, and you're just, you want to delay action, because what you need to do is to change drastic, we need to change trade rules, we need to change the way supply chains, it's not only one company, right? That company has thousands of companies involved in their business. So how do we do that? So I'm more interested now in really in this transformative systems for sustainability. And of course, we have the UN Sustainable Development Goals who address this. It's a plan for development and address so many questions that they're important. But as you see there, it's very hard to disconnect one goal from the other. But many institutions, they say, oh, I do, SDG 2 or 4 or 5, I do gender. And what I like to say, no, if you don't do everything, at least a little bit, or if you don't understand the connections, you're not doing much. So, which is difficult to do, because obviously capacity and it's limited, time is limited, resources are limited. So we need to prioritize, use your best skills, and maybe focus on what you can do best. But you need partnerships. Nobody will do this alone. So that's why the individual question, what can we do, is, yeah, you can start with your house and then maybe influencing your whole family and your building, and you can start expanding. But also try to educate yourself about these connections, because I see a lot of people, oh, I'll not use this or consume that, but there's so many inconsistencies, things, maybe they are young activists, but they are using nail polish full of chemicals because it's cheaper from, I don't know, another country. Try to understand the whole picture. And I think that's the way we can have a bigger impact. And on women, right, let me just address that. And I think because women need to support women. That's simple. For too long, we are also trying this narrative, oh, women are difficult. Today I was hearing someone, since a lot of positions of power are, occupied by men, also if you're a woman, you're just maybe used to kind of, let's say, working for men or serving that, the ideas of men have. And then if women want to do things, they're normally considered difficult or challenging. This is so typical, and it's happening every day, and it's just getting tiring now. And I think women need to stop that and help each other to, instead of making things worse for ourselves, because we already have a lot of challenge in life. So it's just not acceptable that we are also struggling with other women. So I think it just is more cohesion and support, solidarity would make life for all of us so much easier.
Thanks for listening to the Passionistas Project podcast and our interview with Dr. Nicole DePaula. To learn more about women leaders for Planetary Health's mission to empower women to lead planetary health solutions at the front line of development in the Global South, visit WLPH.org. Please visit thepassionistasproject.com to learn more about our podcast and subscription box filled with products made by women-owned businesses and female artisans to inspire you to follow your passions. Double your first box when you sign up for a 1-year subscription. And remember to get your tickets to the 3rd annual Virtual Power of Passionistas Summit from September 21st through 23rd. Early bird tickets are on sale now through August 21st for just $99 at thepassionistasproject.com. So be sure to register before this special discount rate ends. And subscribe to the Passionistas Project podcast so you don't miss any of our upcoming inspiring guests. Until next time, stay well and stay passionate.